scarce, even lions must make do with carrion. The vultures have spotted a giraffe carcass. Alerted by their flight, this group of hyenas hurries to the designated spot. In periods of abundance, a desiccated carcass like this would not interest anyone. But during the months when food is scarce, even the slightest scraps are welcome. Hyenas are perhaps more adept at keeping the leftovers to themselves than all the other carrion eaters, and they certainly have their techniques for dislodging the first arrivals. Vultures, jackals and hyenas vie with each other, each taking its share where it can, using the tools at its disposal: razor beaks, serrated teeth or grinding jaws. In the end, each manages to get enough to ease its hunger a little. The herds of wildebeest are making their way towards the river. Soon the ground will carry the muffled sound of their approach to the carnivores, signaling the end of their wait. It's the sound of the largest land migration on Earth. Several vultures have already taken up strategic positions. Soon there will be hundreds. But waiting nearby is an even more ferocious beast, one the Maasai call Lord of the River. Its camouflage allows it to go largely unnoticed, but when the time comes, it will exact a heavy toll from the horde passing through its domain. For crocodiles, the wildebeest migration is the major event of the year. They exist on meager rations for months and are well prepared when the herds finally arrive. It is now late August. The wildebeest have been on the march for 4 months. They're exhausted and emaciated, but almost at the end of their journey. The scavengers are waiting. Green pastures lie ahead, but so does the final ordeal, fording the River Mara. The wildebeest converge on the river. Several thousand are already massing on the banks, awaiting the moment when the more fearless among them will take the plunge. Sensing that the critical moment is near, African vultures and Ruppel's griffon vultures have descended to a lower altitude. seem programmed to obey an impulse to carry on their journey come what may. Some break their backs, leaping from the steep banks, but it doesn't seem to matter. What matters is to keep going. This is the last step of their long journey. They must make one last effort to reach the opposite bank without drowning or being swept downstream by the current. Once across, getting out of the river is just as dangerous. After hundreds have passed, the muddy rocks offer little grip to their hooves. The late arrivals are just as helpless. This young wildebeest has been left behind by the herd. Unable to decide whether to attempt the crossing alone, it heads back the way it came. On the other bank, those that were injured during the crossing stand no chance of survival. Even if they manage to steer clear of lions and hyenas, they will die from starvation or exhaustion, and the vultures will mop up the remains. The same goes for the carcasses that drift downstream. This crossing, however, has left few casualties, so the vultures and other scavengers will have to wait for the next one. Mid-September, the main body of the wildebeest migration is assembling near the river. Over the last few days, they've been arriving in waves of 1,000 or 2,000. This time, the vultures will be richly rewarded. The banks of the River Mara have rarely witnessed such numbers. The wildebeest are in a dreadful state. The plains have been trampled on for days, and there's nothing left to graze. The youngest and the weakest collapse and remain where they fall. Driven by hunger and urged on by the mass, the first few rows jump. The rest follow, transfixed by this wild frenzy. The first among them discover it was a deadly trap. The opposite bank has a steep wall that the wildebeest can't climb. Some 50,000 animals are trying to ford the river at this point. It's too many. This breathtaking spectacle is turning to tragedy. Finally, they've found a way out. One tiny bottleneck for all of them. Curiously, the wildebeest change their itinerary from year to year, never reusing the crossing points from the last migration. This year's choice is certainly deadly, but no memory will remain in the minds of the survivors. Gradually, peace returns to the River Mara. The number of dead is incalculable. This herd of wildebeest has paid very dearly for its annual passage. "20 or 30 kilometers downstream, a stretch of river claimed by a herd of hippopotami has been turned into a stinking mass grave. Just days ago, the vultures were scrapping over dried-out carcasses. Now, they are proud possessors of a great stockpile of dead meat. The build-up of carcasses is highly dangerous for the Masai Mara ecosystem. The stench of pestilence is already spreading across the grasslands. The river has to be cleaned, and these carcasses cleared away before pollution sets in. The vultures cannot manage the task alone. They always come up against the same problem, ripping the entrails from a carcass that is still intact. The only alternative to waiting for help is to let it decompose. The carcasses have reached the territory of another herd of hippopotami even further downriver. There's enough here to satisfy an army of crocodiles. But not these vegetarians, who, judging by their reaction, also have strict rules about hygiene. The hippopotami don't want anything polluting their stretch of river, and promptly set about cleaning up. One by one, the carcasses are piled up in one spot. It has taken just one day to amass hundreds of wildebeest on the riverbanks. Meanwhile, the crocodiles have so gorged themselves that it's all they can do to steer lethargically between the carcasses, indifferently watching them drift by. In the annals of the Masai Mara, this season will go down as one of the most devastating ever for the wildebeest, but as an outstanding year for the scavengers. Back in the heart of the savannah, the hyenas are on a hunting expedition for other victims of the migration that have been left behind, injured wildebeest that were unable to make it as far as the river. Bloodthirsty brutes, vicious, cowardly thieves, hyenas have been given the worst names. But their role is more commendable than contemptible. They, more than any other predator, contribute to limiting the numbers of herbivores, as each year they kill animals that are old, weak, or sick. Hyenas' gluttony and taste for blood are well known. What is less familiar is their remarkably structured social life. Packs are ruled by a matriarchy, each one with a female leader who cooperates with her sisters and passes her role on to her daughters. It's an established rule that females which are placed high up in the hierarchy are accorded feeding priority and consequently receive a larger share. Through a complex language of body postures and yelps, the hyenas ensure that order reigns as they scramble for the spoils. Hyenas are capable of eating a third of their body weight at one sitting. If unchecked, they will swallow everything from flesh to tendons, skin and bone. Only the horns and hooves are left to one side. The vultures have been holding back, but finally moved to take possession of the carcass. Ruppel's griffons and African vultures are similarly equipped, with a curved beak for slicing and ripping the skin, and a rasp-like tongue to pull flesh into the mouth. Vultures are the most efficient scavengers in the ecological organization of the savanna's ecosystem, outnumbering by far hyenas and jackals. They're also the first to spot carrion and the first to reach it, expending a minimum of effort to do so. Vultures devour more meat than all the other carnivorous mammals put together. fray is interrupted by a young hyena, a lone male. Individuals who have passed the age of sharing the pack life often have difficulties feeding, and sometimes charge groups of vultures. The vultures don't risk retaliating. Once it's eaten its fill, the hyena takes a siesta. The wildebeest that arrived safe and sound have overrun the plains of Masai Mara. The rains are holding off and the grass is still a little dry, but far more abundant than in the Serengeti. All along the river, carcasses are decomposing. The scavengers can get to work. Vultures aren't able to feast without fighting. They just can't help it. They always have to check to see if their neighbour's spoils are better than their own. Vultures' strange bodies are designed for the work they do. Vast wings for gliding in search of carrion, an all-purpose beak, and a heavy, stable body. The long, bald neck is perfect for reaching inaccessible entrails. Gaining access to the carrion is not in fact as chaotic as it may seem. There is a simple principle. Priority is given to the biggest and the most motivated. Others have to wait in line until their turn comes. Those who have already taken their share just digest serenely. Some have stuffed themselves so much that they can hardly move. They can only wait, wings unfolded, facing away from the sun to ward off the heat. At several points along the river, there are still more carcasses piled up along the banks than there are scavengers to feed off them. These little creeks are teeming with crocodiles, which take an active part in the cleaning of the river. And they are not animals that tend to pick at their food. It's not greed alone that makes them tear great chunks of meat like this. Their canines are as sharp as razors, perfect for slicing through meat, but not for chewing it. This obliges them to swallow large pieces whole. The crocodile's digestive juices break down the meat and are in fact corrosive enough to dissolve horns, hooves, and manes. For vultures, grooming is not a luxury. Removing blood and debris from their flight feathers is vital. Meanwhile, back in the bush, jackals are foraging for food. Young, newly weaned jackals are insatiable. They will eat anything. Prey they kill themselves, carrion they happen across, and snacks between meals. Insects, fruit, and even mushrooms. When in a pack, jackals will attack large game that they wouldn't tackle alone. But this female has a family to feed and accepts second-hand prey. She has already located a carcass, probably by observing a vulture's flight. The long hike has whetted her appetite and made her bolder. She doesn't hesitate to drive away the lappet-faced vultures, even though they are stronger than she is. The vultures are indignant, and it won't take them long to strike back. The jackal only has a short time to feed herself. Marabou storks are second-rate scavengers. Outnumbered by their fiercer vulture cousins, they remain on the fringes of the fray, pilfering tiny pieces. A peerless predator, the lion dominates the food chain in the African savanna. Apart from man, it has no natural enemy. Its size and power have always guaranteed undisputed supremacy. Although great hunters, if lions come across carrion, they'll save themselves the effort of a kill. It is difficult to eat undisturbed when vultures are circling overhead. As it takes almost as much effort to defend a carcass as to capture live prey, it's often not worth fighting for. Especially since at this moment the savannah is littered with dead and wounded wildebeest. The lappet-faced vulture is the only vulture able to tear through hide, but as it's also a specialist in retrieving the toughest parts, the cartilages and tendons, it profits at both the beginning and the end of the dissection. Once satisfied, the lappet-faced vultures make way for the smallest vulture species, the Egyptian vulture. This bird is the perfectionist, the finisher. Its beak is specially designed for picking the minute scraps of flesh that stick to the corners of the skeleton. Its nickname is the savannah surgeon. There comes a time when meat-eaters can get no more from a carcass, and when other types of cleaners move in and start work. Flies try to gain access to the smallest crevices, not for feeding, but for laying eggs. Rotting carrion is an ideal spot for larva incubation. Sometimes they choose a carcass that has not yet been plundered by the larger cleaners. The larvae slowly but surely polish it off through to the bone. However, there are even more efficient cleaners than flies and their swarming larvae: safari ants. These ants are nomads that crisscross the savannah, carrying with them under close guard their food, their queen, and their eggs. A single colony can number over 1 million ants. These are awesome carnivores, armed with jaws that can slice through skin and flesh like scalpels. Once they take possession of a carcass, any animal which tries to dislodge them, be it hyena, jackal or vulture, is quickly discouraged. In their collective zeal and spurred by intracolonial competition, the ants leave behind them a spotless skeleton. On the Masai Mara plain, most of the animals injured during the migration have been eliminated. In time, sun, wind and rain will combine to make the bones disappear. It's now late October. 2 months have passed. In the African game reserves, vultures alone consume several thousand tons of organic waste each year. This natural recycling system does not shock the people who live in the savannah. The Maasai do not believe in life after death. Like many others in this land, they leave the remains of their dead to the elements and to the scavengers. The river is now running clear. The piles of carcasses have disappeared. A few scattered remains serve as grisly reminders of the crossing. Between them, the scavengers have performed a remarkable task. The long-awaited rains will transform the river into a raging torrent, and the banks will be washed clean by the sudden rise in the water level. The season's last great spectacle. After the rains, everything comes back to life, in the miracle of spring. It only takes a few days for the grasslands to become green again. for the dry dust in the air to be replaced by the scent of wet grass. The wildebeest will stay here long enough to grow strong again. Then, in late November, they will retrace their steps and return home to the Serengeti. For this hooded vulture and its fellow raptors, the season of plenty has come to an end. The herds have already begun the long trek back to the Tanzanian plains for calving time. They will have come full circle, but first they must once again cross the frontier, the River Mara. On the Tanzanian bank, the scavengers are ready, and they know their victims rarely miss an appointment.